a really strong match. And I think that realistically here, oh, that's a surprise. Not Joji. We're going to be looking. Joji already got his time in the spotlight, right? Joji already got his time in the spotlight. But no, we're going to be taking a look at the match between Renzo and Timo. And I definitely think that this is going to be a very important match. I mean, we've said this about every match, right? I think being able to set the pace of the game between your countries is just like super important, right? Being able to take that early advantage, being able to get that early lead is definitely very important here. But we are going to see Renzo Navarro here. I mean, Renzo Navarro, a player that needs no introduction here, using a team with Okie Dokie. So something that we see, I think it's like kind of a niche pick in Regulation F, so you see it around sometimes. But I mean, upper hand, a really threatening move, especially with all the, pivot pals around, as you would call them. Mario and Luigi, maybe, for Rillaboom and Incineroar, right? So...
Oh, very cool. I think that's going to be the hot topic of, well, basically every format for the rest of time is how do you combat with those Incineroar and Rillaboom. So, hey, if I haven't really played with it, but I do agree with it on paper. If Okie Dokie is going to give you that advantage, I mean, how can you argue with the numbers there? Also coming in with that Landorus that we saw, which always an extremely important Pokemon in every matchup, especially if it's got that maybe that little bit of bulk that Joji's had as well. Alongside with an interesting extreme speed user, we love to see Chen Pao with extreme speed, but this time it's with a Fire Rock Arcanine. So really cool team coming out here. I think that Okie Dokie and that Arcanine may be a popular lead, being able to deter some Intimidate fake outs and allow for some big physical damage to come out.
Can we talk about how crazy it is that we've basically seen a Landorus on every single game that's been like featured on stream, right? I mean, this Pokemon is just incredible, right? I mean, the only differences we've seen between these Landoruses too is like maybe you see an occasional Sandsear over Substitute, but really it's just that Terra Steel and Terra Poison. And yeah, I mean, just an incredibly strong Pokemon. I think this Suzuki and Arcanine too, also being a bit of a more unique pick, right? It's not something you see as frequently, but it's still a really good alternative Intimidator, especially because it can pressure a lot of damage with that choice band, especially next to that Chen Pao. But taking a look at the second team here, I think it's also crucial to see how this Okie Dokie is going to match up into this Rillaboom and Ogerpon and Clefairy. I mean, those are a lot of targets that Okie Dokie would be more than happy to be in front of, but you definitely have to be a little bit scared of this Acrobatics Roaring Moon.
Yeah, wow. Very, very cool team coming out from Timo here. See a lot of pieces that we are definitely familiar with in the form of the Rilla, Urshifu, Ogerpon, and Landorus. And then two pieces that we definitely are familiar with, but maybe not in this type, in this format. Seeing that Roaring Moon is actually a setup, not Tailwind, giving it that Dragon Dance may be very powerful, because it does seem like Renzo's options for shutting that down do involve Intimidate, but we do have the Landorus and the Urshifu, which, well, Arcanine's not a big fan of facing those down, so that Roaring Moon may be the savior against the Okie Dokie, because I do agree it looks very, very good into at least 4 out of 6 of these Pokemon.
Definitely have to say too, there's so much support for this Roaring Moon. Typically on a team like this where you have an alternative redirect, you'd expect something like a Swords Dance Ogerpon, but in this case choosing to that Follow Me, which is going to give another Follow Me support option for that Roaring Moon, as you mentioned. Now the only thing you have to be a little bit scared of with this Roaring Moon is if you take a core like Clefairy, Ogerpon, and Roaring Moon, you are very susceptible to that opposing Hisuian and Arcanine. So definitely going to be a big question here of what's brought, not to mention that you could also just try and leverage your Landorus, which is incredibly strong, into these balanced type teams. But both players, I think, taking a slightly different route than the standard Rillaboom Incineroar approach. So we're looking forward to that. But yeah, I mean, do you have any other thoughts on this matchup or anything else?
I think as we get into it, it'll be very interesting to see what booster this Roaring Moon actually is. Could be speed or attack, and I think that will swing how this matchup's going to go. Though we do see it get intimidated right now, so actually I think we are guaranteed to see a speed boost here.
We are going to see the Intimidate come out here. It's going to be going down onto both that Ogerpon and that Roaring Moon. Okie Dokie also in the lead here, wants to show off a little bit. We are going to see Booster Energy activate. It's going to activate the speed, but it's because of that Intimidate from the Arcanine actually lowering that attack stat most likely, since these Booster Dragon Dance sets typically run that attack booster Roaring Moon. So now I think Renzo feeling very happy about how that Booster Energy was used, and also with this Okie Dokie on the board.
Yeah, wow. Talk about pressure turn 1. We see a Gunk Shot, which is extremely powerful in this Ogerpon. We see a Drain Punch, which is extremely powerful, not only to attack this Roaring Moon, but also pressure that Flying Terra, which actually makes the Arcanine even better. So I was seeing it in team preview, and I really am loving the Arcanine Okie Dokie coming into this amazing position, like almost immediately.
Yeah, I think another big question here too is like, what does the Roaring Moon choose to do? It goes for that knockoff into that Arcanine, opting to weaken it a little bit. But as we saw, Dream Punch being the move of choice going into that, Woodhammer going to Arcanine, trying to get that knockout here. It does not get that knockout. A really big deal here. It's going to allow that Arcanine to go for that Rock Slide, connects on both, gets a ton of damage into his Ogre Pond, and a follow-up Drain Punch hitting this Roaring Moon and getting the clean knockout.
Wow, what a strong showing from Okidogi. I mean, the Arcanine living absolutely important, but even in a world where we see that Arcanine go down to that double up, I think that Drain Punch may have been enough to heal that Okidogi of any damage that might have come its way and get the one-hit KO on the Roaring Moon. So
and we also get a little sneak peek at the Ogre Pond in the back. So Ogre Pond being a very effective tool to deal with this Urshifu. We're going to see also Arcanine has this extreme speed pressure on the opposing Ogre Pond. So a lot of different options that can happen here. Not to mention this Okidogi looking so incredible here, being able to pressure this a potential gunk shot, drain punch, or knockoff, depending on how you want to approach dealing with this Urshifu. But realistically here, I think it's on and find a way around it. We're going to see Spiky Shield come out here. Good call, because it does catch that extreme speed, meaning Arcanine is going to knock itself out, which will allow that Urshifu to go for Surging Strikes into the opposing Okidogi.
yeah, Renzo having a moment of saying, hey, thank you for getting rid of my choice band. Now I can click extreme speed. And Timo saying, hey, well, hold on one second. That was actually according to my plan. I'm going to get that spiky shield and take a KO without really dealing any damage, which is a very, very interesting way to secure that first knockout of the game. Now, Surging Strikes does do over half. It did about 110 health there. We will see if after this Drain Punch, the Okidogi is able to take another set of Surging Strikes, and it looks like most likely it will. Though those rolls do get very weird, and we see an Ogre Water.
I definitely think too, Chien-Pao as an option here is very interesting in the back, right? You probably want to bring in this Ogre Pond to start, but what's going to be really interesting here is the interaction between the two. Whose Ogre Pond is faster? If it's the Wellspring will just be able to confirm this knockout into Hearthflame. But typically the wisdom is that if it's a Hearthflame versus a Wellspring, Hearthflame will usually be faster. We're going to have to see what happens here. I also think too, this Okidogi potentially being in range of the Surging Strikes. We saw it go pretty close to almost like 40% from the first Surging Strikes. And this Okidogi is looking pretty close to around 60% of health. So it's really going to come down to a couple things. Can this Okidogi survive if Surging Strikes goes into it? And whose Ogre Pond is moving first?
Yes, those Mystic Water damage rolls can go absolutely anywhere when it comes to this Urshifu. As we do see the Ferengard come out, very interesting choice, and the Protect. All right, not a lot of damage coming out if it was fired into that Urshifu, but the Ivy Cudgel was targeted correctly, going to be about 40% of that Clefairy, and that Gunk Shot, which could have been absolutely enormous.
Oh, the avoid!
I didn't even notice they targeted that. Very smart play, but unfortunately, powerful moves always come at a cost, so not always going to be landing that there. But it doesn't even see that bad. I mean, best case scenario, obviously, that may have ended the game right there. Worst case scenario, I mean, he didn't really lose a whole lot going for that capitalization there.
Yeah, I mean, wow, like what a miss. I mean, of course, like, yeah, you're still in the game, but you would have loved that move, right? That being said, though, you can just safely go for something like an Ivy Cudgel here. You could even go for Follow Me if you want to make that call out on a Surging Strikes here. But realistically, Ivy Cudgel and Drain Punch being a very safe lock here. You could even try to go for a Horn Leech here into this Urshifu to try and keep it honest. But we are going to see Follow Me actually the move of choice here, and Gunk Shot being locked into this Clefairy. There's going to be a couple different things at play here. First off, is the Urshifu going to go for that Surging Strikes or close combat? We are going to see Clefairy also opt to go for that Follow Me, not using its terrestrialization as well here. We're going to see that Surging Strikes come out into the Ogre Pond.
Ooh.
That turn completely negated from Timo, and this Gunk Shot does connect, hits into this Clefairy and gets the knockout.
Great job to Okidogi for getting those glasses on for that one. I mean, very similar situation where even if Renzo were to miss a second Gunk Shot, which would obviously be quite unlucky, he was netting neutral. So a great play. If you can net neutral on a turn, I think that's always what you go for. So very, very good props to him for recognizing such a good play to be made there and thankfully connecting that time. So I think we see a pretty similar board state here where, as you identified, that Ogre Pond Water is most likely going to be slower. So it does feel pretty safe to actually Follow Me and maybe even pick a knockout with Drain Punch, though Renzo seems to be disagreeing with me, I will say.
Yeah, I think an interesting thing to consider here will be what the Ogre Pawn chooses to lock on the opposing side from Timo, right? If you choose to go for a more aggressive play like Woodhammer to call out that terrestrialization, this could be a very dangerous situation here. We are going to see Terrifier come out here, so valuing that extra damage coming out here, probably going to be either an Ivy Cudgel or Woodhammer coming out here with that terrestrialization. And I think the big question here is with both terrestrializing, if that Woodhammer goes into the opposing Ogre Pawn, it's going to be very difficult for Renzo's Okie Dokie maybe to survive the Surging Strikes. But if Ivy Cudgel goes into that Ogre Pawn and makes the proper call here, you're going to be in a very good position. Not to mention with how much health this Ogre Pawn has, there is a chance it can knock itself out with that Woodhammer. We're going to see Woodhammer come out here. It's going to hit that Ogre Pawn and get the straight knockout. The question is here is, can Okie Dokie survive the opposing Surging Strikes?
Yeah, very interesting play there from Renzo. Again, just keep saying it. He's making very good optimizations on plays like that. He says, okay, if you click the Ivy Cudgel, I will not be knocked out, and I need to Terra to allow myself to live that. But if you do click the Woodhammer, you will be knocking me out, but I'll be knocking you out. And we're going to see the Surging Strike. So
close.
That did exactly half.
Oh, it holds on. Wow, I mean, that was incredible. Yeah, that could have completely swung the game in Timo's favor. If that gets the knockout and Chen Pao is the last Pokemon you have in the back, that could just be a win for Timo there. But Okie Dokie being able to hold on to this likely will be the end of the line for Timo's Urshifu. But wow, I mean, that got really close towards the end. And I mean, we've seen the Ogre Pawn outspeed and go for that Woodhammer was a huge deal here.
Yeah, it would have been really close between the Chen Pao and the Urshifu, but how much does Sacred Sword do? How much does Sucker Punch do? And can this Chen Pao be even close to as good as Okie Dokie, a sentence no one's ever said before, but would it have lived those Surging Strikes? And that may be something we have to find out in Game 2.
Absolutely. And I think a big question here is, how do you adjust if you're on Timo's side? It's actually a pretty difficult lead to deal with. That Arcanine and Okie Dokie puts on a lot of pressure. That being said, there is one candidate that you could bring, which we've seen on stream all day, and it's that Landorus Incarnate, a very scary Pokemon for 2 ground weak Pokemon there. And also, too, with that Arcanine being Terra Fairy, you would be pressured to have to gamble on turn 1 on whether or not you go for that Terra Fairy and get sludge bombed, or you stay in your regular form and get earth powered, right? And I think that would definitely be a worthwhile adjustment to take. Clefairy maybe being nice for that friend guard on the felt like it was just kind of sitting there in the game.
Yeah, and it's a really interesting double up where I think if you were to go something along the lines of Landorus and Ogre Pawn Fire, you can actually pretty safely double tap the Okie Dokie with Earth Power Woodhammer and just say, hey, you can't protect, I want to KO right now. What can you do about this? So we may see a bit more of an offensive direction where the Roaring Moon is also brought in the back to ignore that Intimidate. So we'd love to see an adjustment like that.
Absolutely. But now we can get into this game too. Let's see if both players opted to adjust or they wanted to go with the same approach as last time. We're going to see a similar lead coming out here, except Renzo being the one to make the adjustment here, dropping the Okie Dokie, which was so effective in the first game, maybe anticipating a Landorus in the lead, but Timo saying, no, I'm going to keep leading this Roaring Moon and you are going to have to respect it. So still a situation where Hisuian Arcanine is probably pretty happy to be here, but definitely a situation where you would have preferred Okie Dokie to be in the lead.
Yeah, great lead of the Arcanine here still. I think if you were to change one up, I definitely do agree it should have been the Okie Dokie to make that adjustment to the Ogre Pawn Water. And keeping that Arcanine in this first position here allows you to get that Intimidate. And maybe we'll never know. Maybe the Roaring Moon was already a speed booster set, but now it's definitely a speed booster set for at least the remainder of this game, which is something that must feel pretty good to secure on Renzo's side.
Yeah, I mean, it's so tricky here too, because like, how do you just stop this rock slide from coming out, right? It's just so much pressure. And realistically, yes, you can see a knockoff and a knockoff and a Woodhammer come out. But if Ogre Pawn chooses to go for a follow me here too, that could be pretty bad, because then you'd be able to get a full power choice pin rock slide off here. But you could also opt to go for something like that Ivy Cudgel into the Ogre Pawn to confirm the knockout you weren't able to last time. We're gonna see Ogre Pawn chooses to switch out here immediately. The real question is will we see something like a Dragon Dance here in a more passive play, or are we going to see something a bit more aggressive? And we see it protect.
Renzo having a great capitalization on this again, though, seeing as they locked on this Ivy Cudgel into that switch in on the Clefairy and a Rock Slide. This may be doing over half of the Clefairy, which I think that may be a bit too much damage to take on your Friend Guard user. Now, most likely we're going to be seeing a Follow Me Dragon Dance here, and it'll be up to Roaring Moon himself to see if that is enough to power through this team here.
Well, I really like the consideration here of the switch into that Chin Pao. It would allow you to get that Ivy Cudgel knockout in the Clefairy, leaving Roaring Moon exposed to that ice type attack. You could also opt to keep that Hisuian Arcanine in to do some damage with that Rock Slide. But realistically here, I think Renzo getting such a good turn one here. You want to be chipping away at that Clefairy as it comes in. You don't want it to get in for free here. So we are going to see Arcanine chooses to go for that Rock Slide, get some damage. But we are going to see the Chin Pao switch actually here. So this Rock Slide is going to be doing a crazy amount of damage.
Yeah, very interesting. I think I definitely agreed with the switch to Chen Pao and Ivy Cudgel to take out that Clefairy. Made a lot of sense to me, as you also would be resetting that Intimidate, which again, the more you can intimidate this Roaring Moon, the better you're definitely going to be off. But Renzo's saying, hey, I think I may see a Protect in the near future and want to get that Rock Slide damage off on the Roaring Moon. Where now, like you were saying with the Chen Pao, we may see the ability of Chen Pao to KO the Clefairy and then another Rock Slide target down this Roaring Moon.
I mean, honestly, that Rock Slide's still doing a good chunk of damage here into this Roaring Moon, and now you are actually pressuring a pretty immense amount of damage here. If you choose to go for something like an Ice attack into that Roaring Moon, forcing the Follow Me and a Rock Slide, if that Clefairy goes down to the Ice type move, you are just going to be able to get a ton of damage. You could also just choose to go for that Icicle Crash, force the Follow Me here, and switch back out into that Okie Dokie so you don't get knocked off by this Roaring Moon and lose your choice band on the Arcanine. Both being very viable options here, but again, Okie Dokie just proving it can be a phenomenal switch here, because you have to make such a big read here to go for that Acrobatics into Arcanine, calling out that Dogi.
Yeah, and a very interesting observation here from Renzo. I believe he was seeing this, yes, the Helping Hand along with the Sword of Ruin, and the fact that the Roaring Moon was not at -1 anymore means that knockoff would have been enough to take out that Arcanine, and there would have been no more Rock Slides to be had. But Renzo's seeing through the Follow Me deception and being able to Icicle Crash directly onto the Roaring Moon with only taking about half damage on that Okie Dokie is a great, great advantage for him to take in this game too.
Yeah, Renzo just being able to capitalize every single turn here. We are going to see Urshifu come in here, and there is a Protect available from this Clefairy. So Surging Strikes is putting on a lot of pressure here, but with that Ogre Pond in the back, you are able to have a really you Surging Strikes on either slot. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that you're completely out of the woods yet. There can be an option to lock into something like that Close Combat, calling out an Ogre Pond to come in as well. But that being said, Renzo with a good material advantage here, probably feeling pretty good about where you're at. Not to mention, you could also choose the Icicle Crash into that Urshifu and Gunk Shot into that Urshifu. If Clefairy goes for that Protect, you could fish for a flinch here.
Yeah, and we do have a defensive Water Terra here as an option, but that does leave you open to the Ogre Fire in the back there, as we do see one of the Pokemon switching out here. I think it's a very good play here as well, saying, hey, if I switch out my Chen Pao, I'll be immune here, and if you Surging Strikes my Okie Dokie, you no longer have Sword of Ruin, and I think the odds of the Surging Strikes taking out are about the same as game 2 or game 1.
Yeah, we are going to see Surging Strikes go in. Is it going to be able to get the knockout?
Go either way.
Not going to be able to. It hangs on
man.
again. Wow, what a smart switch, right? Smart switch with that Chin Pao, as you were saying, right? It lowers the odds of getting knocked out there in that Gunk Shot, connecting into the Protect, but I feel like this is still a pretty good outcome of the turn for Renzo.
Yeah, Gunk Shot into the Clefairy. I think at this point in the game, you're up by a lot, and that Gunk Shot not only allows you to just safely target into the Fairy type, but it kind of covers for an Ogre Pond switch as well. Could have been saying, okay, maybe I think you are going to double attack my Urshifu. Being able to possibly even protect that and switch to Ogre Pond could have been an option there. As we do see Helping Hand, which makes this feel like a close combat if I've ever seen one.
Yeah, Clefairy hanging on red HP there. Close combat going into this Ogre Pond. It doesn't get the knockout though, hinting maybe this Ogre Pond is trained very, very defensively. Okie Dokie going for an attack now, going for that Drain Punch to finish off the Clefairy. Even though that is a pretty rough survival for that Clefairy, still a pretty good outcome here. You're removing another piece on Timo's side, and now you're going to be able to cycle this Arcanine freely into the back Pokemon.
Yeah, a little bit interesting there to note. Same thing with what we've seen with the Landorus's and the Urshifus interacting speed tier-wise. Ogre Pond, typically, Ogre Pond Water will not always be seen to be faster than the Urshifu. So Seeing that was the case, it does look like Timo is going to need to target the Ogerpon Water Down with their Ogerpon Fire. Would have been very interesting, a little bit of a different endgame here if that Urshifu had been able to take the Ogerpon out on its own. But as it does not look like a close combat will be coming that way, Spiky Shield actually a really good option here.
Yeah, so Spiky Shield obviously conserving this Ogerpon for this next turn, but we are going to see this Urshifu now free to attack, gets that Surging Strikes into Okidogi. Very safe play here. Knowing that your Ogerpon is faster than the opposing Ogerpon, you can just go for Ivy Cudgel into that Wellspring, force it to go for that Spiky Shield and go for Surging into Okidogi. Now, the question is does Arcanine come in or Chien-Pao? Realistically, Arcanine does appreciate being in front of this Ogerpon, being able to Rock Slide it, but the issue here is that because your Wellspring is low in health, that does mean that Ivy Cudgel will likely take it out, and then you're forced to take that Surging Strike. So maybe needing to burn Terra here, but even with that factored in, it's still going to be a bit of a tricky situation.
Yeah, Fairy Terra being a choice that definitely makes sense into a lot of the common threats, but unfortunately not into the two threats that are in front of it right now. So I think it will be, how does this Arcanine trade, and does it trade positively? I think a head smash into that Ogerpon absolutely is going to be taking a knockout, but is that what you want? Going to be a question we're going to have to see, as Renzo is clicking Extreme Speed, which may be a bit of a better option than taking all that recoil.
Yeah, locking into that extreme speed here, it will allow you to get a bunch of damage into this Urshifu, especially since it has gone for close combat multiple times. Now, the real question is here is, even with this Terra Fairy, right, you're still going to be taking a lot of damage from this Urshifu Surging Strikes that's likely incoming. Is it going to be enough to be able to sustain yourself long enough? But we are actually going to see a Spiky Shield from the opposing Ogerpon here, so maybe trying to delay the turns and actually going for Protect as well. So just trying to scout out the Terra. I guess a smart choice here to see what happens and scout the lock, but still, it's kind of an even board state, or similar to what you would have expected from previous turns.
Yeah. Very, very interesting, but at the same time, definitely makes sense. I feel like seeing that Terra doesn't really change too much in terms of what Timo wants to go for here. I think you definitely still have to prioritize that Ogerpon with that Ivy Cudgel, and Surging Strikes, as much as it is going to do a lot of damage, I think what we really are going to have our eyes on this turn is how much does that Extreme Speed do? Could see it doing maybe half. It's not normal Terra, and it's not next to Chien-Pao, so those are two subtractors that make me a bit unfamiliar with this calculation that's about to happen.
Absolutely here. And if for some reason we saw maybe a surprise outspeed with the Ogerpon Wellspring, maybe a speed tie, that could also be pretty crazy here as well. But we are going to see the move come out here from both players. Extreme Speed going into this Urshifu, doing just under half HP, so not as much damage, but Ivy going into the Arcanine, but getting a critical hit at that too. But did Ivy Cudgel or Hornleech come out here? If it's Hornleech as the move of choice, it is going to be able to potentially knock out this Urshifu. We are going to see it's Ivy Cudgel going into the opposing Ogerpon, and wow, I think, with the critical hit and still surviving, but Surging Strikes coming out as well.
Timo expecting that Arcanine to live, as we all did, and clicking the Surging Strikes, just trying to double up for that knockout. As we trade critical hits with the Ogerpons, this battle has somehow become very close. Wow.
I mean, now I feel like I think Renzo just has enough resources to be able to pull this out if you play it properly. If you choose to go for a attack with this Chien-Pao into the opposing Ogerpon and go for that Hornleech and Urshifu, the only way that you could lose is if you click Icicle Crash and miss. If you go for Sacred Sword into the opposing Ogerpon and you go for Hornleech into the opposing Urshifu, it should be able to win unless your Ogerpon is slower than that. Or even with that factored in, right? It's just a situation where I think Timo had the perfect opportunity to win the game just by going for the safe Ivy Cudgel and the Ogerpon, and it just completely swung the game the other way. But Icicle Crash being locked in here?
Whoa. Uh-oh. If anything could swing this battle, this may have been one of them. As we do see the Terra come out on the Urshifu. It's all coming together.
Terra Grass.
I understand the vision. As the Spiky
it makes the call out.
A man ahead of his time. What a wonderful play coming out with the Icicle Crash. As it does connect too.
Yeah, I mean, that's such a risky play from Timo's side. I think taking two risky plays in a row that didn't necessarily pay off. I think the Terra Grass makes a lot of sense, but if you just go for that follow me, go for that surging strikes, because you know it's forced into the Chien-Pao is forced into attacking there, it could just pay off pretty well. But yeah, we're just going to see now Timo on the back foot, a basically 1 HP Ogerpon versus this Chien-Pao and Ogerpon. And man, like, that's got to feel a little bit sad, right? I mean, realistically, you were so close to having a really good board state there, but I think overthinking it a little bit, not going for that Ivy Cudgel into the opposing Ogerpon just completely changes the situation around.